Good morning, everyone. We are 5 minutes past when I was supposed to get this thing going. I know, it's crazy. So we'll go ahead and get going here because not only have we now begun late, but today being confirmation, I'm finishing early. And this isn't my normal, we'll see how, no, I am leaving here early. No matter where we are, mid-sentence, I'm out, right? So let's go ahead and get started. We are now deep into the book of Chronicles. We're the second half, all of that. I guess I'll start out with this. Last time I was with you, a couple weeks ago, I gave you the instructions, the encouragement, however you want to phrase it, to, as you were rereading the history of Israel, right, because you just finished Kings, to look for those differences, to look for the things that stand out in the two different accounts. So, without me marking anything down, this isn't a test or a quiz, has anything stood out to you that's been drastically, or maybe not drastically different, but has been different or that has been particularly noticeable to you?
Yeah, Jehoshaphat sent the priests and the Levites among the people to teach them the book of the law.
Yes.
It was not pointed out in Kings.
Right, I got left out in Kings, right? And so we're kind of trying to figure out, well, what's going on with this book of the law thing, because I thought they lost it, right? And so clearly at this point in time, they still have the book of the law, right? So good. The reference to the book of the law, right? Remember, the chronicler is likely, we think the chronicler was out of the priestly tradition because they talk more about what the priests and the Levites do and what's going on at the temple, that kind of thing. Good. Anything else? Tom?
I think Chronicles generally gives a more positive description of the Kings. You get more negative stuff in Kings and more positive stuff in Chronicles.
Okay, so at least so far, you've kind of seen a more positive spin on things in Chronicles. I will say that keep an eye on that because one, we're pretty early, right? Things haven't quite gotten as bad as they have. And I mean, you may absolutely be correct on that. I do know the one that sticks out in my mind, which you haven't gotten to yet, is Uzziah definitely looks worse in Chronicles than he does in Judges, right? But again, I think part of that is, once again, to kind of show the differences. I mean, if the king didn't do anything to irritate the priests, he probably looks pretty good in Chronicles. And if he ticked off the government officials, if you will, he's going to look pretty bad in Kings, right? That kind of thing. So we can kind of see what you might call biases of the authors here. Good. Anything else? All right. Good stuff. All right, so as we continue on here, the sections that were covered today is 2 Chronicles 13 to 24. Questions? What came up? Anything that stood out to you, whether it was the same or different from Kings, doesn't matter. Anything you read and thought, well, that's weird. I'm going to ask Pastor about that on Sunday. Got it nailed down. Crystal clear. Pam's shaking her head no, but she's not calling out a question. So I don't know what to make of that, right? Not to call you out, but I just saw you as you were doing it, right? Tom, go ahead.
Well, I think the big story is once they allied with Ahab,
yeah,
by marriage, everything went down.
Right, yeah. So we see not only the marriage alliance with Ahab being a problem that's Jehoshaphat's reign, correct? Make sure I got all my names correct. Yeah. So Jehoshaphat kind of enters into this alliance with Ahab, and it causes problems for Jehoshaphat himself, right? But even more than that, these are lasting promises because there's dynastic elements to this, right? And we see kind of the reverberations of this marriage alliance kind of echoing down the generations, right? That brings a thought to my mind here. At least of the section that we read today, what's the problem that the kings keep running into? The kings of Judah. What do they keep doing that's wrong in the section that we read last week?
They start looking for help other than from God.
Yes, they start looking for help in places other than God. Now, I want to be real careful with this just so that we understand what's going on here, right? Is their problem that they are looking for help among other gods?
Gods, yes.
Say that again?
You said among other gods.
Yes.
Yeah, the problem if they're looking for help.
I'm not asking if that would be a problem. Yes, that would be a problem. Is that what they're doing?
No, they're looking for military help.
That's it. So the kings, at least that we read about today, the kings of Judah, they are, in one sense, extremely faithful, right? With some problems here and there, the kings of Judah trust in God insofar as they are faithful to God, right? They even, to one extent or another, depending on which king it is and whose reign and all of that, actually get high marks for removing idolatry, right, from the kingdom. They don't necessarily get rid of it, right? It's always this persistent problem, right? It's like whatever that invasive ivy is, I can never remember the name of, right? Kudzu, right? You can cut a ton of it out, but if you don't get every last cellular bit of DNA of that stuff, it comes right on back. That's the problem of idolatry in the Old Testament, right? Kings, that's why you keep hearing over and over and over and over and over again, king after king after king got rid of all the idols. And you think, well, if he got rid of all the idols, why does the next king get rid of all the idols too? One, probably didn't get every one of them, and they just keep coming back, right? But that's not where our kings for this reading get knocked, right? Their lack of faith, lack of trust doesn't come in false worship. It comes, as Steve pointed out very accurately, it comes from a desire for military assistance, right? Earthly alliances, right? Why is that a problem?
Because they said if you trust God, He will protect you.
Especially, now we should be, you're correct, but we should be pretty precise here, just so that we don't go off the rails in a wrong direction, right? The people of Judah and Israel were told, you don't need anyone else, just me, right? Don't look anywhere else, just look to me. By the way, and this is a soapbox for another day when I don't have to leave early, right? The United States doesn't have that promise. It is okay that we have allies, right? That is not, because God did not come to us and say the same thing, right? But to the nations of Israel and Judah, God specifically said, trust in me, only me, do not look to the nations, right? And so what are these kings doing? Well, it starts out small, right? Oh, let's go have peace with Ahab. Let's marry into the family, right? By the way, why do you have a marriage alliance? What's the point? Historically? Man, you're all about, you said income, you said wealth and power. Not really. I mean, your nation doesn't necessarily gain anything.
Well, it's to strengthen the ties between the two countries.
Right, it's definitely to strengthen the ties. All right, yes? Alliance. All right, so House Andy, who has his own little kingdom, and the kingdom of Mark, right? They've been at war for a while, right? And, I mean, their grandparents have all been fighting. The two of them are more enlightened. They're sick of it, right? We need to stop this, right? So what they do, Andy has a son, Mark has a daughter. They get together and say, let's marry our kids, right? Now, in this particular case, Mark's daughter would go over to the kingdom of Andy, be the princess, all that kind of stuff, right? Now, a few years pass. What does Mark not want to do with his army? Invade where his grandkids live, right? Right, I mean, you have children, whether it be your children specifically, right? Because if he does invade, if Andy's a bit of a ruthless guy, what's he going to do? Well, he'll just kill your daughter, right? So you have motivation to not fight with each other, right? Well, yeah, right. You know, the in-laws and all of that kind of thing. Absolutely. So that's what's going on between Jehoshaphat and Ahab. They're getting together because the two nations have kind of been fighting with each other, right? They don't like each other. They've been struggling. So the two get together and say, hey, let's get a marriage alliance going. That way we can have peace between our nations and we don't need to worry about the other nations, right? How does that go for them? From a purely human standpoint, does this work? I mean, not for long, right? By the end of our reading, the kings of Judah are making foreign alliances with the people group that is inhabiting Babylon. They're not the Babylonians yet. Blah, 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 ethnic history. So that they can attack Israel, right? So this doesn't work out very well long term to keep the peace. Additionally, we've seen that this causes massive problems, almost ending the bloodline of David as a result, right? You guys remember, did you notice that? How did the bloodline of David almost end? Yeah, Athaliah, who is Ahab's daughter, is married to one of the kings, with an A, right? Because they all have A names. Ahaziah.
Is that the one where they took the youngest boy and hit him?
Yeah. So we read about this in Kings, right? And she is from the nation of Israel. She's in Judah. Her husband dies. So what does that mean for her? Well, it means that she would move to a position called Queen Mother, which is not an insignificant role, but is not the role she wants, right? What position does Athaliah want?
Queen.
She wants queen, full stop, right? Well, we got a secession problem if she has a problem with making that happen, right? What is the monkey wrench in her plan to become queen?
You gotta kill all the sons.
She has sons, right? Those good for nothing, rotten throne stealers, right? So, how do we solve this problem?
Off with their heads.
No sons, you got to go to somewhere else for the regent, and guess what? She's right there ready to pick it up. So she kills all the sons, right? Or at least she thinks that she does. She misses one, right? This, by the way, since I'm always harping on this kind of thing, right? That sounds a lot like another story I've heard of a ruler of a nation who, spends time killing their children, is obsessed with power, tries to wipe out the line of David, right? Who is that I'm thinking of? Herod! Absolutely, look at that! Jay, you look like you do not buy anything I just said. What was that? Are you listening? Okay, good. So I'll take that for what it is then. Right, absolutely. We're seeing an echo, right? A similarity between this account here in 2nd Chronicles and Jesus. Although we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves here, right? Biblically, what is the criteria for a good king versus a bad king? So rule like David. Trust God, right? That's the one that we're having a problem with today. What else?
Be chosen by God.
Well, yeah, being in the line is part of it. Although at least no one in Israel, none of the kings of Israel are ever like thumped for not being descended from David, right? Because God establishes the kingdom of Israel, right? He takes it away as punishment for Solomon's licentious lifestyle and his wandering from faith, right?
Rid all false gods and idols.
Yeah, so removing false worship from the land, personally, right? Having a heart like David, that's a personal faith sort of thing, right? So does the nation trust and believe in God, or do they follow false idols? Does the king trust in God, or does the king follow false idols? And then when it comes to day-to-day affairs, who does the king trust for help, right? Is it God or is it the nations, right? And political alliances, what have you, right? And so, hold on for a second, because we have 3 criteria here, and some of these kings are not keeping all of them, and yet the Bible refers to them as good kings. So what's going on?
The only one that really counts is trust God.
Well, that's the biggest, most important of them. The Bible's grade system, if you will, for kings isn't pass-fail, right? So we do see Jehoshaphat and some of these other kings trusting in other gods, but they still, and it's usually, right, they trusted in foreign gods, they didn't remove all the idols, but they walked like their father David, right? So generally, when it comes down to it, that's the key one. Because if you're not walking as a king, if you're not walking like your father David, you're not doing any of the other things either, right? So you have to at least have that one. Kathy, you had a question? Nope. All right. That was easy. All right, so thoughts before we kind of dig into some text here? Any questions? Anything else you guys want to talk about? All right. See, I had it open to the first place I wanted to go, and then I had to turn the page to look for people's names. All right. Chapter 18 was something that stood out to me as one of those, that's a weird story, right? And so I want to, maybe I was the only one that was a little confused by it. Maybe you all got it, so maybe you can help me with this. In chapter 18, we see Jehoshaphat making that alliance with Ahab, right? And when the 2 kings are together, what plans do they make?
They were going to attack Ramoth Gilead.
Yep, so Ahab says, hey, I would like to take this city, Ramoth Gilead, come help me, right? And what does Jehoshaphat say? He says, well, hold on. He says, yeah, buddy, let's do it. But first, what, Jody? Nice and loud. Yeah, so Ahab says to Jehoshaphat, hey, I want to take this city, come help me. Jehoshaphat says, that sounds like an awesome idea. I am down if God says, if I get the green light from God, right? Good or bad?
Good.
Well done, Jehoshaphat, right? That is something we want you to be doing. So, what does Ahab do?
He says, I got this one guy, but I don't know.
Well, he's not quite there yet. He's not quite there, but yes, we'll get there. He says, oh, absolutely, all right. And he, rings on the intercom, says, send the prophets in, right? And then, 300 or something like that of the court prophets come in? Maybe I'm thinking something else with that number. But anyway, a ton of the court prophets come in, right? Let's pause here. What is a court prophet? Okay. What is the job description of the court prophet?
Tell the king what he wants to hear.
Well, you know what? There's some truth to that. These are the prophets that are on the king's payroll, if you will. He patronizes them, makes sure that they're able to live. And the idea is that the court prophet tells the king what God wants to say. Now, throughout, we see all sorts of court prophets in the Old Testament. How many of them follow that job description rather than your job descriptions? Not very many. There are two that are pretty significant that we know of by name that aren't in today's reading. Bonus points if you can get them. No, Daniel's later and he's not a prophet. Jeremiah is very much not a court prophet. No, he sends letters to the king, and the king, right? Well, you guys haven't gotten there yet, but he sends his prophecy to the king, and the king has it read, and as he's reading it, he cuts off each line and drops it in the fire, right? No, Jeremiah is not under the employment of the king. He's like a prophet at large, which is most of the prophets that we think of, right?
Balaam?
No, again, no. Balaam does what he says what he's supposed to say, but he is a false prophet. He's the prophet of an idol, and he just gets wrapped up in God, yelling at him through a donkey. Who's in my Wednesday night class? We talked about this like 2 weeks ago.
Last week.
What are we studying, Jay? Good job! Jonah is a court prophet. He is a court prophet under Jeroboam II, and he's faithful, at least while he's a court prophet. The other one is really hard bonus points, although you didn't read the story twice, or once, is Obadiah, who's a court prophet for Ahab. And he's the one that hides a whole bunch of prophets when Ahab decides to kill a bunch of them, right? He's the one that Elijah meets and says, hey, go tell Ahab that I'm here. And Obadiah says, why is God so mad at me? Because I'm going to go tell him, and then you're going to disappear because God's going to save you, and then Ahab's going to kill me, right? Why are you making me do this? And Elijah says, no, it's good. Isaiah for a while works as a court prophet, so that's one of the major ones that does. But for the most part, the court prophets are the prophets that end up just telling the king what they want to hear. If you remember last summer, the prophets that Micah was really angry with were court prophets, right? Because that's what they do. They're yes men for the king, right? They don't care what God has to say. They just tell the king what they want to say. And so Ahab brings in his court prophets, and what do they say? They say, go for it. Absolutely. God's with you, Ahab. We're not given context, or we're not giving details, but contextually, clearly something is off about this whole situation, right? Because when this massive group of prophets comes in and says, yeah, absolutely, we've inquired of the Lord, Jehoshaphat says, hold on, right? And what does he say? Where's the actual verse? Is it 6? But Jehoshaphat said, is there not here another prophet of the Lord that we may inquire of, right? There's an implication here that something gives Jehoshaphat he keys in on the fact that none of these guys are actually listening to God. Right, and so Ahab says, well, yeah, I got one, but he's a giant jerk and I don't like him and he says mean stuff to me, right? And Jehoshaphat says, well, go get him. That's the one I want to talk to, right? And so he comes in and his name is Micaiah. So Micaiah, the true prophet, comes in and what does he say?
He says, go for it because God's going to kill you.
Well, he doesn't say that the first time, right? Where that comma was is where he stops. Micaiah says, absolutely, God wants you to go do this, right? Now again, we're missing some details, but the context is there because Ahab responds. Ahab has heard what he wants to hear from the true prophet. Jehoshaphat's probably satisfied. He says, okay, cool. The true prophet of God says, let's go, let's do it. This is favored by God. But Ahab, who knows? Maybe because this guy never has anything good to say to Ahab. Maybe I listened to is probably a transliteration of the text that says he prophesied sarcastically. So maybe it's in his tone. Oh yeah, Ahab, you go on, right? Something about the way he delivered this message, right, be it just the content itself or his tone, Ahab yells at him, right? What does he say? He says, how many times do I have to tell you to actually say what God is telling you, right? Which probably in the history meant, how many times do I have to tell you to tell me what I want to hear, right? But this time he means, how many times do I have to tell you to actually tell me what God says? And so what does Micaiah say?
God wants you to go because he's been so bad, he's going to take you out.
Right, yeah, so Micaiah says, okay, I'll tell you what I actually saw, right? And then we have this vision of Micaiah. We almost never talk about this, but what does Micaiah see? You're not there, you're too far. Go back, right? Micaiah is, at least in a vision, taken somewhere. Where? I like heaven. Let's be more specific, though.
Heaven?
Does this one just say heaven? Where are we?
It just says, I saw the Lord sitting on his throne with the multitudes of heavens.
Yeah, so where are they? They're in the throne room, right? This is the same place Isaiah got to see, right? Micaiah sees it. He just doesn't describe the details, right? But Micaiah gets taken into the throne room of God, and God has a job for one of his angels, right? And he asks for volunteers. What's the job that God has for an angel, or a messenger in this case? All right, who will go for me and...
The deceiving spirit.
Yeah, who will go and lie for me? Right? That's kind of a weird thing for God to say, right? Who will deceive them for me? Right? Now, I'm getting looks, which is good, right? See? You gotta really read it, because right, Trilby? God says, I need someone to go and lie, right? Well, you're just listening intensely like Jay. Okay. Yeah. This is kind of a strange thing. Have we seen God acting like this before, or is this an isolated incident? Where? Well, you can't just say it's happened before.
In my mind,
All right, yeah. You're waiting for them to answer,
Yeah.
right? Yeah. The answer is yes. God has done stuff like this before. It's a big one. You might say it's like the biggest event of the Old Testament. You have already read it. Oh, no. Are you here to announce my fate, Bridget?
Not yet.
No, not yet. Okay.
We're taking Bible baseball right now.
Oh, all right.
Just kind of poke around with the ring was word.
I find out today what color my beard is going to be dyed in a couple of months. So it's my confirmands who are going to get to choose. So on one hand, I'm deeply concerned. On the other hand, I have a year to threaten most of them still. So yeah. If you don't know what that is, where I gave an incentive to help raise money for the missionary seminary vicar that we're supporting, that the Sunday school class that over the year donates the most money gets to choose what color I dye my beard for the National Youth Gathering, which Emily is very excited to be going to the National Youth Gathering with a colorfully bearded pastor. Anyway, when else has this happened? Major, huge, massive event of the Old Testament where God sent spirits to deceive, to entice someone into something like this.
He hardened Pharaoh's heart.
Bingo. He hardens Pharaoh's heart, right? Now, we talk about the hardening of Pharaoh's heart all the time. I'm sure you talked about it when you got there. But he hardens Pharaoh's heart, right? God talks about how he sends, Saul got a little bit different, but a tormenting spirit was sent to him, right? This is a way that it doesn't come up very often, but a way that God judges people, right? We talk often about how God will reveal himself to people, right? Give the gift of faith, but we're also told that for the unrepentant, God hides himself, right? He keeps people in darkness as well. So this is what's going on here. This is not good for Ahab, right? Forget the fact that he's going to go to his death, right? That's honestly not even the biggest problem here, right? That's going to come sooner or later. the big problem here is that God is actively seeking, God's no longer trying to reach Ahab. He is trying to kill Ahab, remove him from office. This is not a good place to be. Ahab, if you hadn't figured it out, is a bad king, right? So, the head court prophet then gets really mad about this whole thing. He's like, Micaiah, since when do you say that since when has God stopped talking to me, right? I'm better than you. God's talking to me. Don't you dare tell me he's not, right? And then Micaiah says, well, pretty soon we'll know who God's actually talking to when, and I think, if my memory serves, he's pretty vague, but something bad's going to happen to this guy. I don't think the Bible says, or maybe I just missed it and need to read more carefully, but this is kind of like when the prophet breaks the yoke that Jeremiah is carrying around, and he says, no, God says good things will happen, and Jeremiah says, well, this is Hananiah, I think is the name of this false prophet. Jeremiah says, well, if God's talking through me, you're going to be dead before this time next year. And that's what happens, right? Similar sort of deals going on here. All right, Ahab and his new ally, Jehoshaphat, buddy, go to fight the city. What's the plan of attack?
First of all, Jehoshaphat is not very smart because he left out.
Seriously, I mean, again, this is one of those places where you're reading it and you're like, there has to be more going on here, or this guy is an idiot. I mean, because he was there when Micaiah said, hey, people are going to try and kill you, right? God wants to kill you in this battle, right? They go to the battle, and what does Ahab say? He says,
Jehoshaphat, you dress up like me.
you know what, Jehoshaphat, you are just such a great king, such a great commander. I could never hold a candle to you. Here's all my clothes. Here's a giant name tag that says Ahab, king of Israel. And don't mind the bullseye on the back. Ignore that part. It's always been there. Trust me, it'll be okay. Right? And Jehoshaphat agrees to this. Like I said, either he's just an idiot, which, I mean, you tend not to just assume that. In my mind, there's got to be something else going on. I don't know what it could be. Maybe they thought, oh, well, maybe we can trick God, and if we don't dress up the right way, then we'll get out of it. I don't know. But yeah, Jehoshaphat, or maybe it's just, oh, you have an idea?
He just trusted God that much and said, you can do anything you want. God's taking you out, I'm going to be all right.
Oh, right. Oh, look at that. Maybe that is, what a positive spin on this. I guess, I mean, I like that. That could be it. I mean, it kind of sticks with some of the other things in Jehoshaphat's reign, but I don't know. I guess just my default with the kings is to assume the worst, right? But it may be, right? Perhaps also another thought that I've had on this is maybe Jehoshaphat is willing to take the risk because he's the only one dressed up as king. So if they win, who gets all the credit and all the glory? Right? So, I mean, who knows? But Ahab somehow, one way or the other, convinces Jehoshaphat to dress up as him and go into battle, ride on the chariots. Doesn't work out. Right. So the enemy king says, ignore everyone but the king, right? Not terribly unusual, and just with the other contextual things, I get the idea. He's saying this to the charioteers, he's telling his Delta squad, right? These are the Navy SEALs, get the king, right? Because other people are fighting, right? Because we know that because, well, no spoilers for something you were supposed to have already read, but because a common soldier does die, right? So the crack squad charioteers go after Ahab. They get close enough and they say, hey, that's not Ahab. And so they leave. Okay, well, that's not the person we were told to kill, so we're not going to go kill him, right? So they just leave. And then what happens to Ahab? He's in some random chariot, a common foot soldier by all accounts. He just, randomly gets shot through with an arrow, right? We learn more about the death of Ahab in the book of Kings, right? He rides away and dies, and then dogs lick his wounds and stuff, because that's what Elijah said would happen to him, and all of that. By the way, it's an assumption, it's a guess, but there's a suspicion that we know the name of the guy who shot the arrow. Has anyone heard this before? I think I mentioned it in my Jonah class, like, I don't know, Jay was probably there for this one now. Offhanded. So there's a guy who shows up, it's one of my favorite stories in Kings, right? Elisha is, a man comes to Elisha, he's an Assyrian, his name is Naaman, and he has leprosy, right? Given the description of Naaman and the fact that he took people in battle, he seems to have been promoted for his fighting. He's described as an archer. There's a decent chance Naaman is the guy that shot the arrow that killed Ahab, and that's why he's got promoted. It doesn't say that, but I think I'd like to believe that someone shot the arrow. It may as well have been him. And then it makes the story of the healing of Naaman that much better, right? Well, I mean, in every sense, right? Because remember, Naaman gets sent to the king of Israel because one of his servants says, hey, in Israel there's a prophet that can heal you. And so Naaman, this high official who might have killed the previous king, goes to the next king and says, hey, I heard you have a prophet that can heal me. And that really ticks off the king, right? He says, what do you mean I have a prophet that can heal you? You're just trying to start another war so you can kill me too. Right? And then, of course, the whole thing happens with Elijah. It's a beautiful story, wonderful. Takes a cart full of dirt home. Fun stuff. But we're almost there till my mid-sentence run away, right? So we see the death of Ahab, right? We see going forward the problems with this marriage alliance that not only caused Jehoshaphat issues, mostly with this conflict, but also we see issues down the line as Ahab's daughter almost kills the whole royal line, and then there's that dramatic, HBO series worthy moments of her being like taken out of the temple and killed outside, and all that really dramatic stuff, where we see God keeping his promises and keeping the line of David alive. Because if Adaliah was successful, there would be no Jesus, right? So God keeps the line of David safe. Even if it goes down to one person, God knows who that person is, and God is going to keep that person alive, right? Which becomes a major theme as we get to the end of these books, and the heir of David is still alive even after the Babylonian captivity, right? It's a key thing that the Babylonians don't kill the king, at least the king of Judah, right? All right, any other questions on anything that we have here? Let's see. I think there was another section I wanted to dig into, but I can't remember what it was now.
Yeah, I find it interesting that
Yes, Joash.
He's so good all of his life until the very end.
Right.
And he just falls off.
Yeah, and he falls off hard too. And so he was 47, 46 or 47 when he died, right? Somewhere in that range. And yeah, he starts out his life just like the prime, the paragon of a king of Israel, right? He's respecting the temple. He's instituting reforms. He's doing everything he's supposed to do. And then, and it really does feel, all of a sudden, he just messes everything up hard too. And so, why do you think that is? Why do you think there's such a dramatic change in Joash's reign? That he goes from wonderful, upstanding king to very problematic.
Well, the time he did well is when Jehoiada the priest was still mentoring him and counseling him. After Jehoiada died, then he listened to other counselors.
Yeah, I think it's some of that. I'm reading into the text, right, which is not what you're supposed to do, but I did it anyway, right? It seems like this is a pretty common sort of thing, right? We talk in church circles about these things called back doors out of the church. These are the various places that people who are in the church stop being in the church, right? By the way, what is the biggest age group that leaves the church?
College.
Nope, not college. What was that? Nope. No. Well, they leave the church for multiple reasons, but no, not out the back door. They go in a different front door, right? Nope.
In the coffin.
Yeah, not there.
The late teens?
Nope, not the late teens. I know, it's the one no one ever thinks of. It shocked me when I first heard it. Before the age of 3. It's parents have their kids, bring them into the church, baptize them, and they never show up again. We lose more membership in the church under the age of 3 than at any other time in life, even more than the kids that go off to college. And quite frankly, the kids that go off to college are much more likely to come back than the ones that disappear before they're 3. Right? So, anyway, something to think about there, not what we're talking about. But I think another one of these back doors is kind of middle age, right? You've gone through the fiery passion of youth where everything is life or death, right? And you're on fire for God, all that. You know how teenagers can be, right? I was one of them too. And you kind of get into the groove and the routine of life, and you're in the middle of it. You're in his case, in his mid-late 40s, and everything's just kind of status quo, and things kind of grow cold. And then something happens. In this case, his mentor dies, and he kind of goes, I'm going to do my own thing now, right? I know what's going on. I know how this world works. I'm going to run it. I'm going to run things my way, right? And then when the next priest kind of gets in his way, he says, well, I know what to do with you, and he has him killed, right? And then he starts making foreign alliances, and God's like, dude, we did this earlier, where I saved you, right? You didn't have to do anything. Don't you remember that giant army that I just took care of? You showed up to the battlefield and it was just full of dead people, right? What's going on? Why are you going to the people who will be the Babylonians, right? Why are you talking to them about this? I got you covered and you know it, right? But Joe, for whatever reason, around the middle of his life, he just kind of, I see it almost as he just floats away. Just kind of is caught up in the cares of the world, right? It's like, the second seed thrown by the sower. The cares of he springs up, does great, and then the cares of the world kind of get him, and he just kind of slowly withers. You almost don't even notice him, and all of a sudden, he's not in church anymore. And then all of a sudden, he's mad at the pastor or something. I don't know. Please, if you're upset with me, don't get me killed. We can work things out, or I can send you to a different congregation, right? We'll work that out. He kind of just seems to fade away from kind of that dedication of his youth, which, like I said, I'm looking at your faces. I can tell that you know that this happens a lot. And it might have even happened to some of you, right? I don't know all your stories well enough. But we don't talk about it very often, right? Because of college kids, which isn't a wrong thing. We got to deal with the college kids too. But a lot of the emphasis goes on that age group because we are actively seeing them disappear. That's not, and it kind of happens all at once, right? But middle age and then especially end of life, that's a major place where this can happen. The amount of people who just feel like God's abandoned them when they're stuck in a room or a facility and no one talks to them and they can't get to church anymore and all these things, it's hard. In fact, over Vicarage, my evangelism project, I did in a Lutheran retirement home because there was a need there because it's hard. Getting old is hard, guys. Which I know I'm in my 30s, I understand that, but I talk to a lot of old people, right? It comes with the job. But, so, I mean, we see, yet, is Joash a good king? Yeah. God, he is listed as one of the good kings. I mean, he has some flaws. He's a problematic king, but he is still faithful, or at least he's listed as it. He is still considered by the Bible to be a good king, because, well, I don't know. Maybe this is the Lutheran coming out, right? But is what Joash does the thing that marks his value in God's eyes?
He restored the temple.
Well, he did, and that's good, but is that what made him favored in God's sight? Is that anything he did? No, right? God doesn't look to those kinds of things, right? In fact, we see this later in a different context with Hezekiah, right? I talked about it last time I was here. To the world thought Hezekiah was just the worst king. God certainly is going to abandon you. Look how awful you've been to the God of your land. And yet God, who doesn't look at the same things that humans look at, says, no, Hezekiah, he and David, man, they're right on par with each other. Hezekiah is one of the best kings of the Old Testament. Even though he's actively being accused by his enemies in this particular case of abandoning God and making God, certainly your God is furious with you because of what you've done. Meanwhile, it's exactly the opposite. God doesn't look at the things we look at. All right. Questions that take up 1 minute or less.
I just have a comment.
Yes.
We used to do a thing called cradle roll in the church, where when a child was baptized, there were things that we gave to the family the first 3 years. And it was through CPH, but it looks like they don't have it anymore, but we should look into it.
We should definitely look into doing stuff like that, yeah. And part of this, and I don't know how much it messes up the statistic, Tom can look into it since he understands how numbers function. Right, I can count, and that's about it. But how much of this is, grandma pressured her kids into going to church, having a baptism, it gets on the rolls, they were never coming back anyway, right? I mean, that kind of thing definitely happens and probably messes with the numbers. But it's, as someone who's kind of in this area of life, I mean, Violet's about to turn 4, we're pretty close. It's easy in a non-malicious way, just for church as a priority to drop. Life is busy. And I'm not saying obviously aligning priorities is a big thing, right? We talk about that all the time in confirmation and stuff like that. But anyway. All right. Oh, they're going to read me my fate?
Okay.
Why do you have a bat? I'm not going to take it that badly. All right. They know what you're doing.
Okay. So, all this school year, they have been raising money for Vicar Wareham, who's a missionary that we support. And you all have as well, but the kids had a little competition to see who could raise the most money. And Pastor Berlinski said that he would then dye his beard whatever color that class chose. So the class winners were the 78ers. So the confirmand will get
Now, before you tell me what color, I will remember this next year. That's not a threat, it's just a random thought.
So, since not all of them are here today, we're gonna kind of do a little poll within them and give them options, and they'll.
You're gonna leave me in suspense.
I think could have an idea what they would like.
Well, let's. I guess we'll keep the suspense going.
So, but then it'll be announced. So the 78ers have won. I wish I would have. I didn't look how much money.
Use teachers.
Use teachers.
Donated over 12.
There might be some
Controversy.
controversy.
I was like that. Yeah, 180 for them. I was
78ers.
So.
And remind me, Riley, what's your salary? Okay. How about you, Addison? Do you make any money?
No.
No. Okay.
So look, I don't make money and I'm still doing
I know.
How much do you make a week?
I get $10 a week.
Oh, look at that. $10 a week. All right.
Plus job sitting.
Oh, there you go.
Anyway, thank you all.
So we will announce the beard color shortly, and it'll.
I'm sure we'll see it on a slide.
So it'll be fun for the national.
Whoever said rainbow, it has to be feasible.
But there
right?
are black light ones.
Yeah, there are ones that glow in the dark.
That glow in the dark instead of black light.
What?
So
Bleach it, it'll last a while.
No, it's going to be bleak.
Somebody said white like Santa.
No, literally just completely white.
we use you.
And each. Well, while you're all here, and I need to go to confirmation, let's take a moment. I'll have everyone stand up, and we'll close with the Lord's Prayer then. I'm going to say it on the camera, too. All right. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. All right, thank you all. If you wouldn't mind helping, if you are able.